Showers in here, some patchy rain for Wales and northern England, but many areas staying dry. And look at the temperatures, 9 or 10 degrees in most towns and cities, certainly through England and Wales. So a pretty mild start to the weekend for early February. On to the details for tomorrow, and cloudy with some rain into Wales, particularly on the west coast. Some of that rain will trickle into northern England, the Midlands and maybe East Anglia later. To the south, most places just dry and cloudy. And further north, a bright day for much of Northern Ireland, southern and eastern Scotland, but blustery again with showers across the Highlands and the Western Isles. A cooler feel here, but again, for most places, pretty mild. On Sunday, we'll see a bit more rain tracking back across Northern Ireland, perhaps into parts of western Scotland and across northern England. Again, much of the south, bar a bit of drizzle over the hills, just dry and fairly drab. Getting quite windy in places once more on Sunday, and again, it's going to be mild, double digits across the board with teens in the south.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome. It is 8 o'clock, live from the world headquarters of GB News. This is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. What caused Nicola Sturgeon to burst into tears this week? As the hunt for the suspected acid attacker continues, should foreign criminals be deported? As they shift to the right, calling themselves the sensible party of business, could Labour steal Tory votes? And as the latest series of The Apprentice gets battered by critics, has reality TV had its day? This is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. The weekend starts here. Bring your own drinks. The admission is free. On tonight's show, my Friday friends, fearless political commentator and broadcaster Lewis Oakley, whose wife said that he can do the show by text. She said, sure, which we don't know if that was a ringing endorsement or not, but he's here. And probably Britain's best newspaper columnist, better columnist than I am broadcaster, The Telegraph's Madeline Grant. Yes, indeed. Also tonight, writer, broadcaster and political commentator Ben Duncan on Labour's pitch to be the party of business. Ex-BBC Crime Watch star Sue Cook on Britain's lawless streets and our broken asylum system. And reality star and pop queen Kerry Katona on the state of modern telly. Plus news about the new hosts of This Morning. My Friday Big Opinion is on the way in just 2 minutes' time, featuring escaped monkeys, fines for having a wee, Lewis Hamilton's mega bucks Ferrari deal, and Nicola Sturgeon in tears. You won't want to miss it. But first, the news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. 2 teenagers who killed Brianna Jai in what's been described as a sadistic attack have been jailed for her murder. 16-year-old Scarlett Jenkinson, who for the first time admitted stabbing the transgender teen, will serve a minimum term of 22 years. Her accomplice, Eddie Ratcliffe, was given a minimum of 20 years. The court heard after coaxing Brianna to a park, they stabbed her 28 times in a frenzied and ferocious attack with a hunting knife. In victim statements, Brianna's family described her killers as 2 predators stalking their prey and said they are pure evil. A manhunt continues tonight for a suspected chemical attacker, with police saying they found significant and important new evidence. A new image has been released of Abdul Azidi, who was last seen at London's King's Cross Underground station on Wednesday evening. Police say the 31-year-old mother who was attacked is still sedated in hospital with life-changing injuries. Met Police Commander John Saville also gave an update on the children involved in the attack.
Thankfully, we've had an update from the hospital that the 2 young children that were with her, their injuries aren't as serious as first thought, and they are not likely to be life-changing. In terms of our manhunt for Azedi, we've got a large team of very experienced detectives leading the manhunt. Thankfully, due to the great response we've had from the public, we're able to follow him and know that he got on a train at 9 p.m, a Victoria Line tube heading south.
And there are fresh warnings of a potential human rights breaches on the BB Stockholm barge as asylum seekers face what's being described as claustrophobic conditions. The Home Affairs Select Committee says cramped living conditions are contributing to a decline in mental health for some residents. The cost of housing asylum claimants on the barge is £120 per person per night. It comes as the Home Office has asked for an emergency £2.6 billion after spending more than expected on asylum accommodation. Last year, the government spent around £8 million a day for migrant accommodation, with official figures showing more than 50,000 were housed in hotel rooms. And TV presenter Johnny Irwin has died at the age of 50 after being diagnosed with terminal cancer in 2020. Mr Irwin was best known for presenting Channel 4's A Place in the Sun and the BBC's Escape to the Country. The presenter had been open about his illness since his diagnosis in the hope of inspiring others to make the most of every day. In a statement posted on social media, his family said he was a truly remarkable soul who touched the lives of so many with kindness, warmth and an infectious spirit. For the latest on all those stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on our screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Mark.
Very sad news about Johnny Irwin and condolences to his family. What caused Nicola Sturgeon to burst into tears this week? Should foreign criminals be deported? And as they shift to the right, could Labour steal Tory votes? Also, as the latest series of The Apprentice gets battered by the critics, has reality TV had its day? Does someone need to say to Lord Sugar, you're fired? All of that plus much more on Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. We start with my Friday Big Opinion. Now, there are lots of things that could accost you in the Scottish Highlands. Swarms of midges, those things bite. Overweight American tourists. Or Nicola Sturgeon cruising around in her expensive SNP-sponsored camper van. But this week, the real threat was a macaque monkey which escaped King Uzzy Zoo in Scotland. The animal was promptly nicknamed King Uzzy Kong, and like the aforementioned Scottish First Minister, had done a runner. How was the creature eventually caught? The monkey, not Nicola Sturgeon. Well, a smart Scottish homeowner lured the primate, not with haggis, neeps and tatties, or a wee dram of Scottish malt. She used homemade Yorkshire puddings. That's right. Good to see Scots still eating English food. The union is safe. So who could resist a bit of Yorkshire pudding, especially if you pour gravy into the middle of it? Meanwhile, the dozy zookeeper who let the monkey escape has been given a Sunday roast. The creature is now back in captivity. Sadly, the same cannot be said for Mrs. Sturgeon. Meanwhile, the popular Muppet character Elmo was busy on social media this week asking his many Twitter followers how everyone's doing. That's the latest fashion, isn't it? Lewis Oakley, how are you doing? How's everyone feeling? Well, the answer, it seems, is not great, with thousands of users sharing their grief and despair at life. Several celebrities joined the Moan Fest. A YouTube star called Steve McInerney, no, me neither, said the world is burning around us, and the actress Rachel Zegler said she was kind of sad. Even President Joe Biden got involved, skipping his 4-hour afternoon nap to talk about mental well-being. Blimey, he can talk. Now, if you have serious mental health issues, it is massively important to reach out for help. We can all agree on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's important. But things aren't that bad, are they? Are they as bad as they were in 1940, when German bombs rained over London, Liverpool, Hull, Birmingham and Cardiff? Remember the good old days when we adopted a positive outlook, understood that life was hard and just got on with it? Like the puppeteer that's got his hand up Elmo's backside, we all need to get a grip. Now, moving on. Rather than sorting out weekly bin collections, antisocial behaviour and fixing potholes, Hertfordshire Council are issuing fines to people having a wee on quiet country roads. Now, this cruel new policy targets drivers of heavy goods vehicles in particular, who are desperate to spend a penny. They've got to go somewhere. With scores of local councils facing bankruptcy and public services getting worse, whatever happened to local government? And is this the most important thing that they could be focusing on? With ordinary Brits choosing a discreet location to relieve themselves in the countryside, this policy is quite literally taking the pee. Motor racing news, and Formula One's Lewis Hamilton, the fastest vegan on planet Earth, is set to leave the Mercedes team and join Ferrari. The championship-winning driver who left the UK to live in Monaco, nothing to do with the tax regime over there, he just loves the views, has signed a £100 million deal to race for the Italian car maker for 2 years. Now, that's a lot of money, isn't it, to pay someone to drive around in a car? Forget about Silverstone or Abu Dhabi. I'd like to see how Hamilton navigated the Birmingham Ring Road on a bank holiday weekend, or the variable speed limit on the M1, which makes a trip to the Midlands feel like a 19th century voyage. And I'll be honest, an uninsured minicab driver would run rings around Lewis Hamilton all day long. Years ago, I took a dodgy taxi to a nightclub at 1 in the morning, and I think we broke the land speed record. In a Vauxhall. Beat that, Ferrari. Whilst French farmers continue to lay siege on Paris over mad environmental costs and stifling red tape, French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte attended a lavish gala dinner in Stockholm in the company of the King and Queen of Sweden. The likes of Macron may now be enjoying foie gras and fillet steak. But let me warn you, folks, soon he'll be eating humble pie and getting his just desserts. The out-of-touch elite will fall. Bring popcorn. And last but not least, it's back to the former Scottish First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, who's not great with technology, is she? She's deleted all of her WhatsApp messages from the pandemic. Oh no! What a shame, because without them, she can't be fully held to account for her response to COVID. Can you imagine the anger if it was Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak who deleted the evidence? But the grilling at the COVID inquiry did see Sturgeon burst into tears, either overwhelmed at the burden of having been First Minister during a pandemic, or suddenly realising, as her compatriot Andrew Neil points out on Twitter this week, that her reputation is in tatters. I'll be honest, if I was the First Minister that had used COVID to push the case for independence and been in charge as a male double rapist was accommodated in a female prison, if I was Scottish First Minister presiding over the highest drug deaths in Europe and abruptly resigning amid a financial scandal around my own party, I'd probably be a little tearful too. Which means that tonight's Top 10 countdown is famous people bursting into tears in public. Yes, it's our Top 10 celebrity waterworks, starting with number 10 and... Gemma Collins, reality star, first day on I'm a Celebrity, reduced her to tears. If she'd had to see Nigel Farage naked, she'd have been crying for a fortnight. How about this at number 9? Theresa May, reduced to tears when resigning. We think that's it anyway, but couldn't hear her over all the champagne corks popping.
Mean.
So unkind. Bring her back, all is forgiven. How about number 8, Sam Smith, crying during lockdown? Who could blame him? A couple of months in a large mansion would destroy anyone. By the way, do you know, I hope I didn't say he. I'll be cancelled for that. They, them. A definite man is Paul Gascoigne at number 7, reduced to tears as he picked up a booking which would have ruled him out of the World Cup final. Not unusual to see a footballer dribbling. Number 6, Kim Kardashian crying over a lost diamond in the sea. We've all been there. Number 5, Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady, on her last day in office, showing her softer side. And we were crying too when John Major turned out to be her replacement. In at number 4, remember this guy? Sports superstar Michael Jordan, crying after being inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. He wasn't crying, though, when he saw the Nike Air Jordan trainer sales figures that would ultimately make him a billionaire. Tears of joy, more like. In at number 3, Gwyneth Paltrow, crying after receiving her Oscar for Shakespeare in Love. She cried during the acceptance speech. We cried at having to sit through the film.
It's a terrible film.
So
How did it
boring.
win? How did it win an Oscar? Terrible film.
I tell you, it was just a bore fest, wasn't it? In fact, even Shakespeare was embarrassed. Number 2, Madeline Grant, Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, at the Queen's funeral. Now, is this a genuine example of emotion or more evidence of her excellent acting abilities? You tell me. And last but not least, in at number 1, former Health Secretary Matt Hancock crying on national television as the first vaccines were rolled out. They told us it was just a little prick, and Matt can definitely identify with that. And that is my Friday Big Opinion. Welcome back to the show. My Friday friends tonight, the brilliant Telegraph columnist and parliamentary sketch writer Madeline Grant and author, writer and podcaster Lewis Oakley. Great to see both of you with me. Nicola Sturgeon, you've had the displeasure of having to write about her this week.
It was glorious. It was, every second of it was wonderful. A trip up to Edinburgh, beautiful city, and the chance to sit face to face to watch the filleting of sturgeon. It was beautiful.
Indeed. Is she still held in this sort of dictator-like esteem by the Scottish people or not?
Oh, I mean, I certainly don't think so. Certainly not if the polling is anything to go on. I noticed, I think there were a lot of, I mean, I don't really know because I was there sitting in a little room and it was deadly silent. So I was sort of out and about sussing out what the Scots' opinion is now. But I definitely sensed from the reception I got to the article that I wrote that there were an awful lot of people, even people who are not like natural Telegraph fans, who thought that it was funny and also felt very, you know, betrayed by the SNP and, you know, the layers upon layer of deception, financial mismanagement, and all of the kind of the tall tales that were told around the time of the independence referendum have come clashing down. So this is all, you know, it seems like everything is going wrong for them at once, and Nicola Sturgeon is just part of that.
Do you agree with Andrew Neil that her reputation is now in tatters? She was, let's not forget, one of the most formidable politicians in Europe.
Well, I think that she was partly the beneficiary of a new kind of politics where you judge more on, like, vibes and how accomplished somebody is at giving a speech or dealing with a press conference rather than actually looking at their record and their achievements. And we had a real problem in Westminster because a lot of Westminster-based journalists would tend to treat Nicola Sturgeon almost as if she were like a visiting dignitary from another country rather than someone that has an awful lot of authority here in the UK.
Yeah,
and
the
has,
SNP cast her as a sort of Scottish Angela Merkel, sort of Merkel.
Yeah, and then there was also the weird SNP paradox where any problem that they have, they can say, well, it's because we're not independent enough. And then when they get something wrong, they can also say, oh, it's Westminster's fault they did this. So there's no real accountability, but I think that is definitely changing.
What did you make of Nicola Sturgeon's waterworks at the COVID inquiry? Were you moved?
No. We all cried during COVID because of the things that these politicians were all doing. I had no sympathy for her at all. I really don't. I mean, look, we're all humans, and I'm sure that what she's going through right now is not nice because she was flying so high in Scotland, just being this dictator in COVID. Her track record in Scotland is terrible.
Shocking.
She, on every metric, from homelessness to everything. But the media seemed to love her. She could do no wrong. And now it's all come crashing down. They're digging up her front garden to try and find money. All of this COVID stuff's come out. It's come out that she's lied. She said she would hand over the WhatsApps, then she's deleted them. But honestly, she gave us the WhatsApps that we needed to see. Well, we'll never know now.
Yes.
So no sympathy for her. You know, I have sympathy for the people that cried because they couldn't be there to hold their mom's hand when they died during lockdown. I have sympathy for those people. But, you know, she said she didn't want to be First Minister at the time. Well, go.
OK.
Yeah.
Well, of course, you know, there is a counterbalance to this argument, which is that she was a formidably popular figure before she stepped down as Scottish First Minister and leader of the SNP. Unprecedented electoral success, massive popular support. She'd also argue that her handling of COVID was far more coherent than that of the English administration, of course, the UK government and Boris Johnson in particular, and Partygate.
Well, she'd be wrong. They were even more bonkers than the Westminster-based governance when it came to COVID, because very often, and it's all coming out now in the WhatsApps that did actually survive the Great Purge, that often they were deliberately doing things because they wanted to differentiate themselves from Westminster.
Yeah.
And there were so many things that self-evidently made no sense, like masks not just in schools, but kids must wear them in the classroom, but not if they don't wear them in the classroom, but if they're wandering around in the corridor, they have to wear a mask. I mean, some of this stuff was obvious.
At the bottom of doors as well.
Oh, yes.
It's madness.
Yes, that was a big plan to improve ventilation.
Well, there you go. Of course, we're still debating COVID, and it's interesting because you've written about COVID in recent days for The Telegraph.
Yes.
I think maybe about a week ago, in which you said that slowly the narrative around lockdowns, the sort of the case for lockdowns, is crumbling, falling away by the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a difference between the first lockdown where it was brand new and terrifying, and I have absolutely massive sympathy for any politician
And it was
that's
only
having
going to be 3 weeks.
Well, that too. Anyone who's having to govern during those times, I feel sympathy for. But I think that a lot of the things that we were told would not be a massive problem, you know, that the kids would bounce back quickly, that there wouldn't be long-term repercussions, that borrowing all this money was not going to create problems. I mean, this is all quite self-evident stuff, but I feel
I had top economists on my radio show telling me that the borrowing was effectively cost-neutral.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of the very clever people at places like The Economist were saying we don't have to worry about interest rates. You know, it's amazing. And now I think we have to keep making this point because even though it's quite an obvious one, nobody really wants to talk about lockdown now because it's over and it was miserable. People would rather focus on the future. But actually, I think a lot of lockdown informs many of our current crises.
Most definitely.
Because this is what they keep coming back to. Nicola Sturgeon is saying, oh, my one mistake, we should have locked down sooner.
Yes.
And the COVID inquiry in the UK as well, that's basically going to conclude we should have locked down sooner, longer, harder.
100%.
Which is ridiculous.
Speaking of ridiculous, briefly, is it ridiculous to fine someone for jumping out of their car and having a wee behind a tree in the countryside?
Oh, that's so ridiculous. I mean, as if we've even got police that have got time to be doing that. Go and solve some actual crime.
Madeleine Grant, have you ever spent a penny somewhere compromising?
Well, women are somewhat hampered in that department, for sure. But you know what? This is my theory about the British state. Is we basically operate like Venezuela on almost everything. But then when you make a mistake, you've got a parking ticket or something. Suddenly we're Singapore and they're after you for the money very efficiently.
Yeah, too right, don't they just? Brilliant stuff. Well, lots more from my Friday friends to come. But next up, as they ditch their green spending spree, support bankers' bonuses and pitch themselves as the responsible party of business, could Labour steal Tory votes? We'll debate that with a top writer, broadcaster and political commentator next.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Coming up, with the police continuing their manhunt for a failed asylum seeker suspected of an acid attack, should foreign criminals be deported? Plus reaction to the awful murder case of Brianna Ghey and how two teenagers could be so cruel to an innocent young girl. We'll discuss that with ex-BBC Crime Watch presenter Sue Cook. But first, Sir Keir Starmer promised an unprecedented partnership model with business if Labour wins the next election, calling the idea that companies only care about their shareholders lazy. The opposition leader told Labour's business conference at the Oval Cricket Ground in London this week that his party would get under the bonnet to fix an unprecedented stagnation in British productivity growth. So could a message of fiscal responsibility see Labour steal Tory votes at the next election? Let's speak to writer, broadcaster and political commentator, and if we're honest, ex-reality star, no less, Ben Duncan.
God, you've outed me already, Mark, and I've only just arrived.
It was Big Brother back in the day, wasn't it?
Many years ago, the Channel 4 version, the real version.
Yeah, that was it. Well, that was great, and you're back now. Great to see you.
Thank you.
This will have Conservative supporters looking over their shoulders a bit, weren't they? That Labour shift to the right and steal Conservative support.
Well, to quote the Propeller Heads, I don't know if you're a big fan of theirs, but I am, it's just a little bit of history repeating, Mark. I think if you go...
Please don't sing.
Oh, my God, if I sang, everyone would go home, so we're not going to start with that.
But you think echoes of Blairism, essentially, here?
Well, I think not only Blairism, you go back to Harold Wilson. I mean, obviously, any governing party has to be a coalition in itself. So, you know, Wilson wouldn't have got in the 60s, the bigger majority he had in 66 if he hadn't won over former Tory voters. And then, of course, in the 80s, 90s, obviously Labour was out in the 80s, but by the 90s, you know, Blair had to completely recalibrate things, and he and Mo Mowlam and John Smith before him, you know, went round, I think it was called the prawn cocktail circuit.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. Do Labour need Tory votes to win, or are they already home and hosed? Is this an academic discussion?
Absolutely not academic. I think, I mean, it's the old debate whether, you know, oppositions win elections, government lose, and that sort of thing. I'm sure Madeleine probably knows more about that than I do, in that sort of area. But I think, effectively, if Labour win, it won't necessarily be because of the popularity of Keir Starmer. I think everyone knows this. We've talked about this till we're blue in the face. I think it's to do with the fact that Tory voters are staying at home. You look at the recent by-elections, Bedfordshire is a very good example. Yorkshire, you know, it's been going throughout the country. We held on to Uxbridge just. But effectively, you know, that's because Tory voters are disenchanted and staying at home.
Yeah, Madeleine, you reported on the Labour Business Conference for your paper. You wrote about Angela Rayner. Were you convinced by Labour's offer?
Well, I wouldn't say, I mean, reported, I sort of made fun of it. But no, I mean, I thought it was all rather very trivial, skin-deep sort of stuff, lots of platitudes. And in fact, you know, it is very hard to say what Labour stand for because, you know, they just flip-flop on so much. A few hours before the start of the conference, they had decided that actually they are relaxed about bankers' bonuses and they're not going to introduce a cap on it. Even though when the Conservatives changed policy on this a few months ago, they were calling them, you know, evil and on the wrong side of history. It's extraordinary how quickly they pivot on absolutely everything. I think your point about how, you know, it really is due to a decline of enthusiasm for the Tory party is very important. And also the fact that in, you know, the last general election in 2019, you know, the electorate, I think, is that era of old tribal loyalty is dead. I think if people feel they've been betrayed or let down, their loyalties can flip pretty quickly. Right now, Labour are doing very well because so much is going right for them all at once. Obviously, Keir Starmer has got the party into a more acceptable outfit than it was under Jeremy Corbyn, but also the implosion of the SNP and also possibly the rise of the Reform Party also taking votes away from the Conservatives. So, you know, it's partly things that they've just been very fortunate to coincide with.
Well, of course, Labour supporters would argue, Lewis, that actually they're demonstrating fiscal prudence here. First of all, they're rowing back on the £28 billion a year pledge for their green revolution. Yep. Rachel Reeves has effectively said, look, we can't afford it. We've got to balance the books. They've said the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, will sign off on any of Labour's spending plans. This will be a very convincing message for some voters on the right, surely?
I don't see that they're going to actually win anyone over. They've got, you know, they've played it really well until now, which has been just stand back and let the Tories fall on their face, which has served them brilliantly. We know they're going to win because a load of Conservative voters are going to go to Reform or stay at home. So they'll win by default, not because they're popular, as you're saying. Yes. But on their budgeting and what they said today, look, we need them to do well. They are going to be the next government. So there's no point being here critical, they don't know what they're doing. They are going to be the next government. I hope to God they know what they're doing, and I hope to God it works, because we can't keep having such bad business and such a terrible economy. I will say, you know, looking through what they said, it wasn't like I was like, oh, great, you know, they've solved it, thank God, can't wait for them to come in. How are we going to drink all the champagne because we're going to be so rich?
Yeah, but what got me is that they kept talking about stagnation and decline being the hallmarks of the economy as it currently stands. And what they're proposing seems to me to be essentially Jeremy Hunt in a wig, you know. It's pretty hard to separate now what their economic policy is, and it seems likely that the next thing they will pivot on will be their 28 billion green budget. And then when interviewed, they say, well, it's not our fault that Liz Truss crashed the economy. But actually, you know, that this steady as she goes thing is exactly what the Conservatives have been doing up to now. So what people get is more of the same.
Ben.
And also, quite simply, it's also a matter of just the pendulum. You know, if the government has been in for a long time, the Tories have been in one form or another since 2014. People want to change. The same under New Labour, 13 years. You know, most people, even on the right, would argue Brown wasn't doing a terribly bad job towards the end of the noughties. People were just sick of the same faces marked round the cabinet table. They want new blood. And I think Starmer, in a weird way, has quite an appeal to Middle England. There's very much the sort of grammar school boy of the 1950s look about him. He's polite, he's good to people's mothers, he looks OK in a suit. I think he could do a bit better, even popularity-wise, than most people realise.
Are you buying the idea of Labour as the party of business now? I mean, the Iceland boss has transferred his support from the Tories to Labour. But do you think that this sudden Damascene conversion to capitalism is convincing and authentic?
I think the Iceland boss, that's a bit of Sean Woodward going on. I think there might be some personal reasons why, you know, he was a sort of centrist in the Tory party, becoming a candidate. I don't know all the details. I think that in terms of whether Labour, New Labour, whatever we call it, Starmer's Labour, is the party of business, I think it's the party of globalisation, as the Conservatives are. I don't think there's much between them. You know, would Jeremy Hunt, Keir Starmer disagree? They probably wouldn't on many things. Just as Nigel Farage and George Galloway have a few things in common. I think there's this weird sort of smorgasbord of the centre ground of maybe people not being very passionate about very much, you know, going with the flow, the world is the way it is, and they are managing the world and the economy. Whereas I think conviction politicians of right and left, Corbyn, Galloway, Farage, Richard Tice, they want to change things, and that's the big dividing line in our society.
I think you're probably right, and the old metric of left versus right doesn't work anymore. My thanks to the political commentator and broadcaster Ben Duncan. Do come back and see us again soon, Ben. Coming up, with the police continuing their manhunt for a failed asylum seeker suspected of an acid attack, should foreign criminals be deported? Plus, a reaction to the awful murder case.
Ground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Happy Friday, one and all. Coming up, as the latest series of The Apprentice gets battered by the critics, has reality TV had its day? Is it time for someone to say to Lord Sugar, "You're fired"? Plus, can ITV save this morning with the announcement of 2 permanent new stars to replace Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield? Well, reality star, pop queen and This Morning regular Kerry Katona joins me shortly. But first, the manhunt continues for Abdul Shukur Ezedi, the man who is suspected of committing a chemical attack in South London on Wednesday that injured 12 people. Let me give you the whole story, you won't believe it. It has come to light that Ezedi entered the UK illegally in 2016, applied for asylum twice, didn't get it, but was not removed from the country. He then committed sexual assault and indecent exposure, receiving a suspended sentence. Amazingly, he was then granted asylum because of his claim that he's now a Christian, something which is being disputed. All of this prior to his alleged acid attack on 2 children, a mother and 9 others on Wednesday. Let's get reaction from broadcaster and the former presenter of BBC Crime Watch, Sue Cook. Sue, good to see you again. Evidence, if you needed it, that our asylum system is broken.
Yes, if you needed it. No, it's absolutely crazy. And I think it's happening quite a bit that asylum seekers are going to priests and saying, "Will you vouch for me? I'm going to be a Christian, and will you vouch for me?" And then they're getting through that way. And so we've got to stop being so wishy-washy and so scared about being accused of being racist and do something concrete about it. It doesn't have to be emotional. It just has to be realistic. And it's crazy that he was actually convicted of a sexual assault. And because he wasn't sentenced for a long enough time, it meant that they could carry on and let him have this asylum. But I mean, if you're convicted of anything, no matter how short or long the sentence, if you're convicted of something, you should never be given asylum.
Definitely. Let's bring my Friday friends into this if we can, Sue Cook. I'm delighted to have with me Lewis Oakley and Madeline Grant. And Madeline, I want to ask you about this, which is regarding this sort of story, the reaction. As Sue Cook just implied there in her answer, it's a national scandal, but it's not an isolated case.
No, it's not. There have been numerous cases like this, including the, thankfully wasn't fatal, but the bombing of the maternity hospital in Liverpool. Yeah. The culprit had said that he was a Christian, and then when they were going through his belongings after he detonated the bomb and killed himself, and thankfully no one else, they found a Quran and a prayer mat. And, you know, it just stands to reason that if people can get away with this, that they will. Unfortunately, it has been very difficult to even talk about this up till now. Often we have to wait for there to be some kind of tragedy, avoidable tragedy, before we can have a frank discussion. Because you can guarantee that if anyone had raised this point publicly, or indeed if they did raise it publicly, then they would have been called racist, heartless, etc. This is not the Britain I love, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I think increasingly people are fed up to the back teeth with this. The idea that the desires of foreign criminals should trump those of the law-abiding majority of UK citizens.
Well, yeah, Lewis, it doesn't make sense to me that we can't easily and swiftly deport foreign criminals.
Well, this is the thing, and it just adds to the Tories' problems of why could they not get on top of this? Why can they not deal with it? Because I think the wider thing is it damages the whole idea of immigration as a whole. We know by the statistics, immigration is right up there on the top things that people are going to be voting for in this next election. So people need to feel confident in the system. People need to feel that, look, if you break our laws seriously, obviously we're not going to kick anyone out for stealing a loaf of bread, but if you are seriously breaking our laws, that you go home with. There is just that process. And I think that makes people then feel better about the idea of immigration as a whole. It will probably come down the scale. But whilst we're in this situation now, it polls so high as a topic that the British people just want to see taken care of properly.
Well, they do. Now, Sue, talking of law and order, the girl and boy who murdered 16-year-old Brianna Gay will be jailed until they no longer present a danger to the public. This is the words of the judge in sentencing today. Jenkinson was jailed for at least 22 years, Ratcliffe for a minimum of 20. It's hard to fathom a story like this, isn't it, Sue?
It is. I mean, it's rather like the Bulger case, which I remember because when I was on Crime Watch in those days. And ever since Crime Watch is something that's worried me. Why are we wiring some children up wrongly? Or they're not even being wired up at all properly. And it doesn't sound as though it's necessarily their family background. They both seem to have quite respectable family backgrounds. But I'll tell you what I think the problem is. It's kids these days can access appalling things on their phones. And my solution would be to say that all children under 16 should have specially adapted phones that cannot access certain parts of the internet. So you can only get information and certain things and child-friendly content. I mean, I don't see that censorship. It's just, you can have cigarettes laws, alcohol laws, all for under 16. It's not allowed. So why don't we not allow certain content on the internet for children? And I think children should have, until they're 16, specially adapted phones that won't show violent content, because I really worry about what they're seeing. It's violent content, terrible torture videos these children are watching, and sexual content, pornographic content as well. It's violent stuff. And they really shouldn't be watching them. It's just wiring them up all wrong.
It's a brilliant idea. Sue, it's a hard question to answer, but you've reported on crime for many years, including at the BBC Crime Watch programme. Does Britain feel like it's more violent and dangerous than ever?
In some ways it does, and in some ways it doesn't. I mean, some crime figures overall seem to be going down. But what's going up is knife crime. That's really surging. And the real worry is that it's younger people who are perpetrating knife crime. And that is something that's worried me ever since very early days on Crime Watch, the availability of really appalling knives. I mean, we all know we can get Mum campaign, didn't they, a couple of weeks ago? And the government has announced they're going to ban these zombie knives and machetes, but they haven't legally ratified it yet. What are they waiting for? Why don't they do it right now? Because people are losing their lives.
Sue, it's too late to wish you a happy new year, but it's great to have you back on the show. Look forward to catching up with you again in the near future. My thanks to broadcaster Sue Cook. Coming up, as the latest series of The Apprentice gets battered by critics, has reality TV had its day? Is it time for someone to get Lord Sugar into his boardroom and say, "You're fired"? Plus, can ITV save this morning with the announcement of 2 permanent new stars to replace Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield? Well, reality star, pop queen and This Morning regular Kerry Katona is next.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The BBC Apprentice show came back with a bang last night, or was it a whimper, with the Sun's Ali Ross lambasting the debut episode of season 18, saying the show is over, finished and done, criticising the casting, the challenges and what he described as the tired complacency of the programme. So, do channels hang on to these shows for too long? Is it time that the BBC said to the makers of The Apprentice and Lord Sugar himself, "You're fired"? Let's get the views of pop queen and reality TV star, good friend of mine, Kerry Katona. Kerry, lovely to see you. Do you think the BBC are flogging a dead horse here? I know you're not the biggest fan of The Apprentice, but I mean, 18 seasons, surely that's enough.
Wow. I think there's a big switch in TV at the minute. There's a massive change up that's going on in television at the moment. I think we have a new generation of social media, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube. Kids are not really. There was a time when I was younger, we had like 4 or 5 channels, and that's all we had, and we'd all spend time around the TV as a family. But now my children come home and they all just go off in the bedrooms, they're on the tablets, they're on the phones, getting my kids to watch any show with me, even if it's a reality show that I'm in.
Yeah.
They're just not interested. And to be honest, I've never actually watched The Apprentice.
Well, I don't blame you. I've only seen 1 or 2 episodes myself, but I do wonder whether they might put themselves out of their misery. You've starred in many reality shows, haven't you, yourself, including the big Celebrity Detox.
Yeah.
What do you think about this style of programme? Do you think it's lazy telly?
You know what? That show I really enjoyed, and I think a lot of people could have got a lot of stuff from that, because it was about, I think not just seeing celebrities, but I'm a very open and honest book, and it went in real depth about you as a person, about trauma and PTSD and addiction and how you feel about your own looks. I think that was something that was, I'd have paid to have been there myself. That's something I would have done anyway. I love doing stuff like that.
Did you have to drink your own wee on that programme, Kerry?
It's not the worst thing I've ever done for TV, let's be honest.
Family show, Kerry. We've all had a drink.
Yeah.
Listen.
I get cockroaches.
Blimey.
I've had witchy grub, like I'm a celebrity. I think that was probably worse than drinking my own pee. But I think that was like a clickbait story. The show itself actually went a lot. I cried so much doing that show because I found out a lot about myself. So I really enjoyed doing that show. I think that's one of my favourites I've done. I think they've actually got rid of it after 1 series, but I actually learned a lot about myself doing that.
Well, let's bring in my top pundits if we can as well, Kerry. We've got Lewis Oakley and Madeline Grant. And Lewis, I wonder whether the problem with some of these reality shows, like The Apprentice, is that they're so edited, they're so overproduced, they're not reality at all.
That's the thing, and you kind of think, oh, did that really happen, or did the producer tell you to go and do that? I think the problem they've got with some of these shows, they've gone on so long now, we're just tired of it, we want new things. And I think also, a lot of them, like X Factor, Britain's Got Talent, all those, winning means nothing. So if you've kind of invested like 8 weeks or whatever it is in, oh, who will be the winner? And then it didn't really mean anything, never saw them ever again. I think that's a big issue.
Yeah.
But I do think that there are good things happening now. The Traitors was really good. And as Kerry was saying, you know, oh, we don't sit down and watch anymore. But actually, my 14-year-old and me and my partner all sat down and watched The Traitors and we were all into it. So I think it's still got it, but it's just the newer formats now.
Yeah, what do you think, Madeline? Do you think that the commissioners are lazy and greedy when they run to 18 series of The Apprentice?
I think that it's the first season of these things is almost always the best, and it never quite lives up to the promise. I think I was about 10 or 11, no, maybe about 9 or 10 when the first Big Brother came out, and I just remember how incredibly formative that was.
Yeah.
People thought it was going to change the way that we lived forever, that it was this incredible new social experiment. And actually, on that first season, they had almost quite regular people on the show. But as people got used to the format, they then, to make it more exciting, they started booking people who were really eccentric, really quirky type people. It didn't feel like reality anymore, and it got more and more fantastical with every season. And I think in microcosm, that's basically what happens with every reality TV show. It becomes more and more fake, as Lewis was saying.
Yeah, that's it. It becomes a parody of itself, doesn't it? Kerry, you've been a regular on This Morning, and ITV are expected to announce their permanent replacements for Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield. Now, this is not confirmed, it's unofficial, it's speculation, but it's thought that Good Morning Britain's Ben Shepherd and the woman made famous by Ant and Dec, Kat Deely, might be the ones to take over. Can they save This Morning?
Absolutely. I've worked with Kat, met like SMTV and CGUK. I was actually going to take over Kat Deely when she left SMTV, and she is one of the loveliest ladies I've ever worked with. And Ben Shepherd, who I've worked with loads over the years, is one of the most genuine, down-to-earth people you will meet. And I love This Morning. It's an institution of Britain, isn't it? Everybody, you know, do. And I think having that good shake-up is a really, really good thing. I think Kat Deely and Ben Shepherd are a really good match.
Yeah, because it's an important show for ITV. It's their morning schedule. They've got to get it right, haven't they?
Yeah, I think that's a really good pick. I think it's a nice dynamic. And Kat was over in America for a couple of years, so it's nice to have her back in England where she belongs. And I think she's a really good fit. And I've missed seeing Kat Deely on she's kind of nostalgic for me, you know, from being back in Atomic Kitten and doing CDUK. I used to play her sister when she was Cat the dog, and you know, so I think it's really lovely. And Ben's a lovely bloke as well, so I think it's a really, really nice team. And they're funny, they can be serious, and they're almost down to earth, and that's what you need.
Well, Kerry,
I mean, the industry's just full of so many fake people that pretend to be something they're not, and I think they're quite genuine people.
It's not often I disagree with you, Kerry Katona, but I think that you and I should do it.
Well, I completely agree with you.
The chemistry's there. By the way, you look fantastically well. You're still busy doing loads of telly. Have you got the OnlyFans? Is that still happening?
You sold for a discount.
Listen, I've just paid my tax bill. I could do with a few quid. Do you think I should open an OnlyFans?
I don't understand why not everybody's doing an OnlyFans. I really, really don't. It's give me money to invest in myself with all my other businesses and give my kids a great private education. And I have no shame in it. I don't do anything that I don't do on a beach.
You are one of the survivors of showbiz. You look fabulous. Great to see you. Catch up soon, Kerry.
Thank you. God bless. Have a great evening.
There you go, the fabulous Kerry Katona. What fun. My thanks to my brilliant Friday friends, Lewis Oakley and Madeline Grant, who are both going into central London now for a couple of drinks, I'm told. But next up is the one and only Patrick Christie. Patrick, what have you got for us?
A heck of a lot, actually, Mark. I've done an interview with Robert Jenrick, the former immigration minister. Some astonishing claims about James Cleverly in relation to the idea that Turkey is now being classed as unsafe. Answering the question as to whether or not we could deport this asylum seeker alleged acid attacker, even if we do catch him. Should we have an LGBTQ+ history month? We appear to have a month for everything these days. And is the Church of England gaming our asylum system?
Well, I quite like the ring of Patrick Christie's month. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'd be all over that, Mark, as you can imagine. But is 1 month enough? That's the problem.
Listen, do join us for Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11. Patrick's next. Don't go anywhere.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Good evening. Tomorrow will stay pretty mild across the south, a blustery day again across parts of the north with a mixture of sunshine and showers. We've got high pressure to the south, low pressure to the north, and in between this weather front is just edging southwards. The isobars squeezing together. It's been very gusty over northeast England, southeast Scotland, staying that way into this evening, but slowly overnight the winds will ease at least a little bit. Staying breezy though, particularly in the far north with more showers in here. Some patchy rain for Wales and northern England, but many areas staying dry. And look at the temperatures, 9 or 10 degrees in most towns and cities, certainly through England and Wales. So a pretty mild start to the weekend for early February. On to the details for tomorrow, and cloudy with some rain into Wales, particularly on the west coast. Some of that rain will trickle into northern England, the Midlands and maybe East Anglia later. To the south, most places just dry and cloudy. And further north, a bright day for much of Northern Ireland, southern and eastern Scotland, but blustery again with showers across the Highlands and the Western Isles. A cooler feel here, but again, for most places, pretty mild. On Sunday, we'll see a bit more rain tracking back across Northern Ireland, perhaps into parts of western Scotland and across northern England. Again, much of the south, bar a bit of drizzle over the hills, just dry and fairly drab. Getting quite windy in places once more on Sunday, and again, it's going to be mild, double digits across the board with teens in the south.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Carson, this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christie's. Tonight, the asylum seeker manhunt is on.
I'm going to make a personal appeal to him. So do the right thing and hand yourself in.
Police, the Church of England, judges, human rights activists. Well, have they all got blood on their hands? And
Islamism of this kind is a cancer. It's got to be rooted out and destroyed.
Ex-Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick issues a stark warning to Home Secretary James Cleverly. Plus, why do we have an LGBT History Month, but just one day for mothers and a weekend for veterans? Also, the Facebook post that shamed the BBC revealed right here on this show. On my panel tonight, it is GB News star Alex Armstrong. We also have ex-BBC political chief John Sargent and Apprentice finalist Joanna Jarju. Oh, and what's going on here?
It's Punxsutawney Phil!
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Is the Church of England helping violent sex-crazed asylum seekers stay in Britain? Next.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. 2 teenagers who killed Brianna Jai in what's been described as a sadistic attack have been given life sentences for her murder. 16-year-old Scarlett Jenkinson, who for the first time admitted stabbing the